Gamers, howdy, how are you doing? How have you been? Sorry I forgot to make a video. I was in New York with the family. I got to see Hadestown, the musical. Did you guys know that I have a degree in theater and drama studies and I have a diploma in acting? I was gonna be a theater actor, but then COVID happened, so I couldn't go outside and, you know, audition for things. Now I'm an online content creator. The pipeline is real. All this to say, hello, welcome to another video. If you saw the title, you know what today is about. Today is about level 20 D&D. I made a video about a few weeks ago talking about how to balance monsters for level 20, how to balance combat and encounters. There you go. Today we're going to be talking... I always like get mid-sentence and then realize I'm very thirsty. Sorry, Gio. Today we're going to be talking about level 20 D&D and why it's the most fun. Because I think a lot of people don't get it. One of my friends, Ronald the Rules Lawyer, I play Pathfinder with them. They mentioned to me, hey, I saw your video on balancing. It's really informative. However, I still don't know why it's fun to be at level 20. Not a critique, just like, I want to know why you do this to yourself. That's not exactly what he said, but that's how I interpreted it. Anyway, we're going to be talking about why level 20 D&D is the most fun, because I truly believe that it is the most fun version of D&D. But before we get into that, just a brief message today. Did you know that I have a Patreon? And did you know that this video is sponsored by my patrons? Oh my goodness. Stop committing crimes! I swear, people just like to get injured in and around the time that I start recording. Did you know that today's video is sponsored by my patrons? That is right, my patrons on Patreon. If you join today, you get to see every single one of my videos 24 hours early. On top of that, on top of seeing my videos early, you can send me messages and DMs and I will answer them. You can talk about your favorite D&D builds, just talk about D&D in general. You can ask questions. It is a great way to encourage the parasocial relationship between us. It is only $3 a month, and it helps support me continue to make the content that you guys love as often as I do it. So, anyway, back to the video. Today I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about level 20 D&D. I'm going to tell you about a few of the things that people claim to be our fun, some of the things that I find fun, and I'm going to talk about why level 20 D&D is so fun. First of all, from the DM side, from my personal perspective of this, the scale of problems that your players can solve is vast. So incredibly vast. By level 20, your player characters are gods. They are gods. To suggest anything else is ridiculous. Reminder, level 20 is insanely high power. Your player characters should be and feel like gods. A fighter can deal over 100 damage in a round. I know that sounds like, oh, it's only 100 damage. Reminder, that is as much as a meteorite in Dungeons and Dragons. If a fighter can condense the power of a meteorite into their sword, that's fucking crazy. Additionally, wizards can summon meteorites. They can become simulacrums of themselves via the power of wish at instant speed. They can have an infinite army of themselves by the simple casting of the wish spell. They can hallow areas. They can forbid things from entering. They have their own demi-plane. They can do whatever the fuck they want. Wizards can shape reality to their whims. Monks are present. But level 20 characters, the scale at which they operate is vast beyond compare. I can safely say that a level 20 party, a level 20 character is so incredibly powerful. It's beyond the scope of what I think most people think about. When people think about level 20, they might even think about like laying siege to a town or a country or being like a necromancer that's like, I'm an evil guy. You can take over entire planes of reality at level 20. Let that be clear. The only thing stopping you from taking over a planes of reality at that point is a god meddling with you. The scale is so vast, and as a DM, I find that area of play to be so exhilarating because I get to write stories that are so vast. I get to make encounters and problems that are just as vast as my players. Which brings me to the next thing. The options that players have to solve problems is astronomically higher than any other tier of play. At level 5, you can probably save a town from an invasion of goblins and bandits. At level 10, you could probably save a country. At level 15, you can save a planet. At level 20, you can solve an entire plane's worth of problems, which is why when you present people with problems that are so complex but smaller scale, players will have an absolute field day figuring out these issues. Let me give you a direct example. In my level 20 D&D campaign, Paperwork Pantheon, that I DM every single Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we have a great cast of characters: Amelia Som, That Great Gentleman, Patrick Keefe, Brooklyn Tuesday, and Danny Phantom EXE, all play with me, all good friends. One of the first episodes of that campaign, one of the first arc I presented them with, was a conundrum. They're playing as gods in this campaign. They are literal gods in the game, and I presented them with an issue. There was a town that used to worship the sun god, but now they weren't really doing that anymore. They were now worshiping a different god. Not exactly not the sun god, it's just like a different one, and they don't know how this happened, the pantheon that rules over them. So they sent this strike team of lesser gods, the players, to go and investigate, and what they found was shocking. Eventually, after talking to the townsfolk, they eventually realized that most of the townsfolk had been replaced, or at the very least had been flooded with a population of simulacrums. That is right, most of the population were not real. They were fake. They were copies of the god of complications by the name of Z's. And the god of complications had, well, caused a few issues, a few complications, if you will. One of which being disseminating propaganda into the populace via word of mouth. It's easy to get rumors started when you have 100,000 other people to corroborate your rumor. And that is exactly what Z's took advantage of. All with the spell Alter Self at will, and among other abilities, they could perfectly blend in and make everybody believe that they were real, but at the same time pushing whatever narrative they wanted. And the narrative they wanted was that they wanted them to stop worshipping the original sun god and start worshipping just slightly differently, but would actually on a whole change who they worship. Very sneaky stuff, very tricksy in the brain, you know? So the party didn't know what to do. There's 100,000 of these people that could instantly fight them, and if they decided to go in there with their own army, just guns a-blazing, the damage would be cataclysmic. So they needed some other plan. They needed something else that could work. And Danny, playing as Godfrey, the god of penance, imagine if for a moment if Ghost Rider was given a sword. He came up with a plan. The plan was the following. They would create their own simulacrum army, not to fight the present one, not to fight Z's army, the Zarmy, if you will, but to use them as a large-scale workforce to excavate precious minerals and gold from the desert, from the neighboring desert. They would use them as a workforce in order to bring up valuable goods that they could then bring in and trade through trading caravans, slowly but surely siphoning out the wealth from the city. And upon siphoning out all of the wealth, the simulacrum would no longer be able to purchase and maintain their spell materials and components. And once they were vulnerable and unable to fight back, that is when they would move in with their simulacrum army and take down this trickster god once and for all. And all of this would happen over the course of only a couple of days, because they can simply do this at a scale that is bigger than any other tier of play. If a small caravan comes in once a week, this might take years. It might not even successfully happen. However, if a trading caravan comes in every day, each with 10,000 people, someone's gonna notice. And if they're selling good enough goods like valuable gems, holy shit, we gotta buy that.
Yeah, I couldn't help but buy it.
We gotta buy it.
Buy it.
And in order to keep up appearances, they took advantage of the simulacrum's simple orders of pretend to be normal, and would slowly but surely, everybody lost all of their goods to this trading caravan, and the party had accumulated a great deal of wealth, and were able to successfully sack and destroy this trickster god Z's. And over the course of several years, they rebuilt the town and helped rehabilitate everybody so that they're no longer under the influence of extreme propaganda. But that is, in my opinion, one of the most genius uses of a simulacrum army I've ever seen. Creating a large-scale workforce that never tires, never sleeps, never grows hungry, and then using them to make fake a trade caravan? That's hilarious. Name me another tier of play that allows you to successfully destabilize an economy. Name me one.
I'll wait!
And you're like, oh, well, if I took several months, okay, they did this in a day. It took them a day, and it took them 3 days. They built the army in a day. It took them a day to excavate everything, and then it took them a day of continuous trade before everybody had ran out of money. Level 20 is insane for precisely this reason. The scale at which your players can operate is so much grander, and so many problems can be solved via methods that are non-violent, but inherently insane to think about and to manage. But I love it. I love playing at this tier play for precisely that reason, because my players have the options. This brings me to another thing. Players have options. Level 20 D&D is also fun, not just because players are so scaled so much higher, but they have options in combat and in non-combat encounters. They have so many different ways to interact with their world and to figure things out that it makes it feel much more tactile. The world is so much more responsive, because at lower levels, players, I feel lots of the time, wish they could do many more things. They wish they could... There's a lot of logical inconsistencies in the world. Why can't I just intimidate this person into giving me all their money? I'm a super beefed up fighter. Well, you failed the intimidation check, so you gotta fumble some way as to why you can't do that. Or you could just cast fear on them, or charm person at those levels as well to have all of that work. Or you could be a god and threaten them to get all their shit. This is a very easy, basic example. There's also the fact that, like, the way that you can structure your puzzles at level 20 is so much more interesting. To play at level 20, I'm gonna go more in depth on this in another video, but simple thing, read the spell lists in the back of your books. D&D is spells. If you think it isn't, you're a martial player, and that's fine, but listen, DMs, read the spell lists. Read every spell. Every spell has a use and can be used in a way to create an encounter. I had a spell given to my player. I created a situation for my players, a puzzle. The puzzle was the following. In case you won't know, I'm going to say simulacrum a lot. They're kind of a hallmark of high-level play. Anyway, there was a simulacrum who had been given specific instructions, and they needed to get those instructions from them. However, the simulacrum had been true polymorphed into a chicken, and the chicken was under the effects of the silence spell. So this chicken could not speak and was holding very important information. The party needed a way to get this information out of the chicken. They needed to ensure they could dispel the magic of the true polymorph and the silence without dispelling the simulacrum. So, they needed to cast Dispel Magic, obviously. But how do you ensure this? You could just leave it up to chance and hope that the dice roll in your favor, but if you dispel that simulacrum, they just turn to snow, and they're gone forever, and you can't get them back. And they will lose that information. So the party came up with a genius plan. You see, they had a bard in their party. They had a lore bard. And the bard was going to do the following. They were going to give the person casting Dispel Magic bardic inspiration, so they could guarantee make the check to dispel the true polymorph. And then, on the check to dispel the simulacrum, they were going to use their cutting words reaction ability in order to prevent that dispelling from happening. And now this may seem like a simple thing, but this had lots of careful planning in order to ensure that all of this would happen. There was also different debuffs that were going to come into effect via reactions. Bane was going to be cast at some point. There was so many different things that were going to be happening all at once in order to simply get information out of a chicken.
Don't do drugs. If you're doing it, stop it. Get some help. McDonald's wants you to give yourself a chance.
And that, I think, is really interesting as well. That is a puzzle that works at lower tier play, sure, but is way more interesting at higher tier play when there's so many more options that could happen. The players also don't know if casting the spell will trigger some sort of explosive effect or a glyph of warding hidden somewhere on the creature's body in and around their cage. There are so many interesting things that you can do at higher tier play that affect how your players approach problems and puzzles, and allows you to change how you approach problems and puzzles. The spell list is full of puzzles for you. You just need to find them, and I think that is super, super, super interesting and dynamic for high tier play. Final point for why high tier play is better is in my opinion the most fun is the combat. I went over in a previous video how to balance combat if you're having trouble, but the way the players have to approach combat is so much more tactical at high tier play, because you're not just throwing bandits at them that are shooting at them from a distance anymore. You're throwing things at them that have trigger abilities and abilities that will activate upon certain conditions being met. There are abilities that will trigger other abilities if certain things happen. There's so many domino effects that you can set up up. If the spell magic is cast on this creature, they get true polymorph out of it. However, their contingency spell will activate, giving them a buff and making them grow in size, changing the dynamic of the fight entirely. There's so many different things that you can stack onto your creatures at this point that fights become unwieldy and difficult for your players to manage. They have to think really carefully about how they approach problems. They can't just be willy-nilly dispelling all the magical effects, because some effects trigger upon being dispelled. If they come in with a simulacrum army of their own, that simulacrum army is going to look dumb goofy when the anti-magic field arrives. There are so many different ways for players to approach combat and for you as a DM to approach combat in strategic manners that I think that there is no other tier of play that comes even close because of the sheer number of options that you have at your disposal. Let's say the party walks into a room, boom, they're hit with a Hallow effect that makes them vulnerable to psychic damage. They need to now dispel the Hallow in order to avoid being absolutely decimated. But in order to dispel the Hallow, they need to make sure that they're high on initiative. How do you make sure they're high on initiative? They make sure that they cast Gift of Alacrity at the beginning of the day and did not get hit with dispel magic throughout the day. There are so many effects like this that can happen, and so many intricacies with how you can plan your combat that it is a sheer delight to actually watch it happen. I think level 20 D&D is super fun, and as a DM, there's no design space that I think is more satisfying than at this high tier of play. But that is all from me for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below. If you like the stories I told, let me know as well. I can do more D&D story time type videos if you enjoyed them. And the level 20 DM bootcamp series will continue. Next episode, I'm going to be talking about spells. So if that interests you, please be sure to stick around, give a subscribe so you don't miss it. Get the fuck out of my face.